join in.
I think John's the only one who indicated he would not be able to be here this evening.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello, Mary.
Hi, Bert.
Yeah, I just want to check my audio. Can you all hear me?
We will be doing that, but thank you for volunteering. We'll go through the attendees to check audio.
Okay, perfect.
Mary,
Yes, Dave.
my internet's awful janky here, so I might get booted off, but I will be back on. So, just to give you the heads up on that.
Thank you, Dave. We hope you stay with us.
Yeah. Do my best.
Megan, I see we have Andrew connected. I will go ahead with the introduction and then we'll get started. So good evening, everyone. This open meeting of the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission is convening by a video conference pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 as extended on July 16th, 2022. This meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating remotely via Zoom as posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording, so please silence all phones and devices and remember to keep yourself on mute if you're not speaking. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full names for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name or who acts inappropriately. This meeting will feature public comment, and you're also welcome to submit comments via email to the Plus department. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the Planning and Economic Development Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Okay, Seth Engelborg joining in. How are you this evening?
Good, thank you. I'm here.
Christy Ferrantella?
Here.
Don Holgate?
Here.
Thank you, Don. I don't see Wendy Hudson at this point. Dave Iverson?
Here.
Bert Johnson?
Here.
Nat Lowell?
Here.
Barry Rector?
Here.
Joe Topham?
Here.
And we're aware that John Trudell is not able to join us this evening. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Andrew Vorse?
Here.
Megan Trudell?
Here.
Patrick Reed?
Here.
And Gail Bennett?
Here.
Thank you. And anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. We do have Bill Greeter joining us.
Here.
Thank you, Bill. And I think you're the only person. Oh, I missed Raisa from the Mass DOT. Sorry, Raisa.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. And before we do have a quorum present for the roll call. Before we go to approve of the agenda, Megan had an edit to the order of the items.
If we could, I did post an update late last week, just not to content, just reordering. And in that, it looks like I inadvertently did not move the town meeting discussion to the end of the agenda. It would just make sense to kind of include that with the plus agreement, then the enabling legislation, and then any town meeting discussion. If that all works for you, that is what I would propose.
All right, so can I get a motion to approve the agenda with moving item H to be after the current item K?
So moved.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you, Christy, for the second. Roll call vote, Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. Moving to the next item on the agenda, public comment. Are there members of the public that wish to provide comments at this time on items not on the agenda? Megan, I don't see any hands raised. Okay. So we will go on. Minutes from August 22nd. Those were provided in the packet. Did anybody have any comments or edits for those minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes submitted.
Thank you, Barry. Second. Second, Bert. Thank you. Roll call vote, Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. Minutes of September 19th. I did email the Plus Department with an edit. There was a section that did not belong in the document under other business.
Mhm.
Any other comments or edits for the minutes of September 19th?
Motion to accept those minutes with appropriate edits and changes as necessary.
Thank you, Barry.
Second.
Thank you, Nat. Roll call vote, Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you. Patrick will take us through the next couple of items. Patrick, the first item, tip amendment, NRTA low emission vehicles, open 21-day comment period. Go ahead and introduce that and let us know when you're ready for the motion.
Sure. Yeah, this is a request from NRTA Administrator Paul O'Leary. The NRTA was awarded roughly $4 million, just over $4 million through a FY22 low-no grant, low emission bus vehicle purchase grant award. And so the tip has to be approved in order to, our tip has to be amended in order to move that project forward to purchase the buses. So the action today would be to open the 21-day comment period to receive any comments on the tip amendment.
I'll make a motion to open the comment period for 21 days.
Thank you, Bert. Second?
Second.
Megan?
Just for the record, Wendy has joined us. It's 5:07.
Yes, thank you, Megan.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I missed the second.
Also, for the record, I was on the phone, but I was muted, so I was unable to, participate. Thank you.
Thank you, and I did see the phone number there. So, Dawn, was that your second on the motion?
Yeah, I seconded Mary.
Thank you very much. Comments? Roll call vote, Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you, Patrick. Next item.
Sure, I'll try to keep these transportation items under 10 minutes because I know it's a long agenda tonight. But the first item is related to long-range transportation plan work program. The request is to provide any guidance that you might have on the long-range transportation plan work program that was kind of described in your memo and your packet. The LRTP, as it's referred to in acronym, it's a required component of the Region's 3C Transportation Planning Program. And in other words, this means in order to be eligible for federal aid to support a project, we have to fulfill this task every 4 to 5 years. And what is it? Well, it's a plan that basically prioritizes projects that the commission feels feel would be appropriate candidates for federal aid. It's also a compendium of planning data, mobility data for the community, as well as decision makers to use to help support transportation related decision making. In addition to these primary ends, the Commission can choose to discuss other strategies or smaller non-federal aid projects in the document just for the purposes of making a policy statement. For this cycle, staff proposes to maintain the existing list of long-range transportation plan projects from the 2020 plan with minor additions or removals per guidance from the MP and EDC. And you might want to base this decision making based on current funding outlook and also input, community input. So similar to previous years, staff proposes to use a questionnaire to gather community input, and the response data will be compiled in a report to the MP and EDC to inform any decision making or project ranking that you might want to embark on. A draft questionnaire was attached in your packet for review. You can provide any guidance tonight. You can also call me, email me later if you haven't had a chance to read through it yet. But the draft questionnaire is focused on trade-offs and preferences rather than specific projects. The idea here is that, sometimes those non-scientific samples, you have one community that participates more than another part of the community, and sometimes it's best to try to focus on transportation elements rather than specific projects. So specifically, the draft questionnaire addresses 6 criteria: safety, equity, sustainability, convenience, maintenance of character and culture, and implementation. And so each of the projects that's included in the 2020 plan offers benefits to those aforementioned sort of buckets or criteria, if you will, some more so in certain buckets than others. And so the idea here would be to rank projects based on which buckets you feel are the most important relative to others. The draft questionnaire's first questions provide basic information about the respondent, so data can be spliced and diced. The example that I guess I'd give you is that you'd be able to compare responses from people who drive with responses from people who walk and bike, or preferences of seasonal residents versus people who live here year round. So the idea is you kind of have different data points to kind of look at and help inform your decision making. We propose to work on the LRTP update beginning this month. We'll begin compiling data on mobility and demographics for the update of that kind of compendium style element that I talked about. And then we propose to finalize and release the questionnaire in late November. So the questionnaire would be advertised and available through mid-April or so, at which time we would begin drafting the plan. And so that would kind of sync up with bringing the report to you. You can see what the community's sort of input preferences are and use that to kind of look at that draft project list to make your decisions about ranking. Staff proposes to update the MP and EDC at its February meeting about our progress, also the April meeting, and then come summer, around the June-July timeframe, we'll need to start working through the edit process, the revision process, and move to endorsement toward the end of summer. Happy to take any comments or questions on the LRTP. And again, if you haven't had a chance to look through that draft questionnaire and you want to do so and send comments later, even if you're a member of the public looking in and watching at home, happy to provide any or take any comments or feedback so we can get the best input.
Patrick, go ahead and give your email address for those.
Oh, sure.
The appropriate email address for the comments.
Sure. It's preed@nantucket-ma.gov, Preed. So yeah, that would be the best way to get in contact with me to provide any feedback.
Thank you, Patrick. Any comments from commissioners? Any comments from members of the public on this survey, since it will be requesting public input? Not seeing any. Patrick, do you need a motion, or is this just a point of information at the moment?
It's a point of information at this point.
Great, thank you. All right, next item. Still on your watch there.
Sure. The next item is an amendment. The action here would be to open a 21-day comment period for amendment to our fiscal year 23 Unified Planning Work Program. You approved the fiscal year 23 UPWP, as it's referred to, an acronym, back in the summer, at which time we indicated that we might need to bring an update to you based on findings related to our overhead rate. After an analysis, the region reduced its overhead rate costs. Roughly, previously they're 92% of salary costs. We've reduced them to 82% of salary costs. Per MassDOT contracting requirements, we've also rolled in administrative support costs into our overhead rather than segregating it out as a separate personnel cost. Additional minor updates to the UPWP include a reduction of direct cost budget associated with GIS software. We figured out what the actual cost would be based on our FY22 request. So that's great. It's less expensive than we had imagined. And then an increase to my salary, which is consistent with the Luna raise. I'm an Atwell employee, but per town HR approval, they kept my salary consistent with the Luna contract. So the net of all that financial move around is a small savings of about $7,400, which we reallocated to direct costs for product-based tasks. And the final item here is that there's a non-financial amendment discussed in your memo to the livable, sustainable, complete streets planning task. The change in language for this task is just to account for timing for the complete streets grant, which I'll describe later in sort of a project update section, as well as the SS4A or Safe Streets and Roads for All grant that we applied for and discussed in previous meetings. It just has to do with the timing and syncing up our work with the actual timing of when we might receive these awards. So the language is generalized here to support technical requests as well as tactical work of the traffic safety work group. In short, the amendment as proposed is largely administrative. It's intended to align our financial picture in the UPWP with future reporting. Happy to answer any questions you all might have about it.
All right, any questions or comments from committee members, commission members, excuse me? None. So Patrick, you need a motion to open the 21-day comment period on this?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Christy. Second.
Second.
I got Nat there first. Thank you. Any further comments? If not, roll call vote. Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you all. Okay, Patrick, and now your update.
Okay, quick updates on some things that are going on in the transportation planning world. Some things related to projects, also give you an update on BPAC, the WPI study that we're doing, et cetera. First, we'll talk about paid parking. Per our fiscal year 22 UPWP, we had a line item in there related to technical assistance for parking. And on September 28th, per the request of the town, I presented an overview to the select board about the decision points that would need to be addressed were the town to pursue a paid parking program. The outcome of that meeting was that the select board would like to kind of think through the establishment of a parking commission, which would further analyze these decision points. And that discussion carried on to their October 19th meeting. WPI, the students from WPI or Worcester Polytech have arrived. They are assisting our office with a study on loading and unloading in town. The idea is that they're going to kind of look at demand, try to quantify how much demand there is at peak, and think about different options to make loading and unloading a little bit more efficient for everybody. So currently they're drafting their project proposal. At some point, they'll be reaching out to local stakeholders for interviews. And if you have any interested or relevant parties that you'd like to send our way, please let me know. I'd love to connect the students with them. BPAC's ongoing work, or the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, their ongoing work involves looking at nuisance stop signs and also thinking about micromobility. We last met in late September and we'll be meeting again in November per discussion with the vice chair of that group. Current tasks include compiling a list of nuisance stop signs. So these are stop signs on shared use paths that face the path. The idea here is that we want to kind of make a list of these and then start the process to remove them. The rationale for their removal is that there's not compliance with these stop signs, and it creates a situation where motorists anticipate that a bicyclist will slow down and stop, but they don't. And so there's a mismatch in terms of what is expected for each user. And prioritizing the need of your more vulnerable user is consistent with a safe systems approach, and that's sort of the direction of BPAC. Additionally, with this, there would be, and per what was passed in a previous town meeting, the implementation of stop signs at intersections with vehicular approaches prior to a shared use path. So if you are coming up to a shared use path at an intersection, you would now have a stop sign, or in some cases, a yield sign to kind of tell you that you are the one who needs to slow down or stop to accommodate the non-motorist. It's just the best practice in transportation planning and design right now. BPAC is also in the process of thinking about approaches to micromobility devices. The town has the authority to regulate speeds, we learn, but we've been kind of discussing whether or not enforcement may prove challenging for that. And so at our next meeting, I'll be bringing to BPAC a palette of options and also a potential decision-making framework they could consider for any recommendations related to regulating micromobility. In terms of MassDOT coordination, we've been doing our typical 3C coordination, but I've also been working with folks at MassDOT and other regional commissions to kind of get a better understanding of how these regions use federal aid funds to support smaller projects and needs. And so that work is ongoing. I mean, these conversations are really important because I've heard frequently from not only you all, but folks in town that small improvements are really important and impact quality of life. The question is, how do we kind of set up a logistics framework that we can use some of our regional funds to support these needs? It's very challenging, but I'm working through sort of the bureaucracy to try to figure out how some of these other commissions have made it work. So that's something that's been on my plate. For projects, I'd like to provide an update on 3 specific projects. In terms of the Wawanet Path, the MP and EDC and Plus staff, we continue to work with Federal Highway on the execution of a memorandum of agreement for previous FLAP awards. Federal Highway, they can't begin survey work until an MOA has been executed, and we're awaiting their revisions anxiously, hoping that we'll kind of move it along. They are doing a great job, and we want to be sure that we kind of get the right language in there and the right framework set up to be sure that we all have clear expectations about what the town needs for public engagement as well as scheduling. The goal here is to try to keep the tempo going, so that way we'd be ready for some initial public engagement in spring, but it's not quite clear yet if that is realistic or not. For the FLAP grant that you all had reviewed at a previous meeting, and again, this is the Federal Land Access Program grant, we haven't received word about any sort of decision on this grant yet. And I've asked around, and it sounds like that's consistent with what other regions are hearing. So everybody's still waiting to hear about whether or not their project will be awarded funding. Sparks, Williams, and Pleasant. This is an ongoing complete streets project that dates back to the kind of 2020, 2021 timeframe. Project is being led by the town's DPW, but MP and EDC and Plus staff have been working to support their efforts through coordination meetings. Most recently, we've worked with MassDOT Complete Streets on a new grant request for $500,000. This is the maximum we could ask for through that program. The town, we previously actually had 114 roughly of grant funding to support construction of a portion of that project, which would be sidewalk enhancements on Sparks, Williams, and Pleasant. But unfortunately, we didn't have our design award or our design package ready to go and moved. We weren't able to move it forward into construction yet. So if we're awarded the $500,000, that will be there for us when we need it and can move forward with construction. We've also worked with the DPW and town administration to prioritize different segments of this project for a phased approach to design and implement the sidewalk facilities. So staff from MP and EDC or Plus and the DPW proposed to prioritize a sidewalk on the south side of Pleasant Street between Five Corners and the Mid-Island Roundabout, a sidewalk on the north side of Williams Lane, and a sidewalk widening on Sparks Avenue between the roundabout and the Rotary. Future phases would include a shared use path on Sparks Avenue between Williams Lane and the Mid-Island Roundabout. The choice to sort of deprioritize that shared use path is based on the sense that if we want to do it, we want to do it right. We want to make sure there's enough separation for for cyclists and walkers between the pathway and the roadway. So really that's the width of the landscape buffer that's there. And that requires a closer look at the roadway layout to see what we can do. There's also some complexities related to the cemetery. It's always hard to design and build a project near a cemetery for obvious reasons. So being sensitive to that is important. And then also some questions about the development near the Mid-Island roundabout and what that design will look like and how we can kind of integrate our proposal with that future development project. Currently, we have about 90K left on a design contract with Beta, and next steps involve confirming sort of our priority approach with water and sewer, and then following up with the contractor to say we're ready to start moving forward with the bring our concept forward into design for the priority aspects of the project. The last project I'll speak about is the in-town bike path. Spent a lot of time scoping this project. We're looking at sort of recontracting with VHB, a contractor that did the previous marking plans for this project. There have been many different approaches to this project in the past, including work by external parties to look at a pathway along the creeks. What we propose to do is to look at a bikeable, walkable connection between Goose Pond Road and the Rotary. This would allow a continuous path between Goose Pond Road all the way to the Pulpus Connector, assuming that the DPW's Milestone Connector project, which is an extension of the shared use path between Monomoy and Milestone, is advanced. So you can think of it as one long continuous shared use path that would be on the north side of Milestone Road. If we were able to move forward with that concept, it would likely require significant funding as well as coordination with utilities. It wouldn't be an easy or simple project, but for that particular stretch, it's one of those high volume biker and pedestrian segments that it makes sense to spend some time and resources thinking about it and trying to get it done the best way possible for peds and bikes. So the scope will include resurvey of the roadway, utility coordination, easement plans, and ideally 25% design. Based on the task proposed, it's likely that costs will exceed 47K, which is what remains on our previous contract. And so we'll have to figure out a funding source for the gap. But that's where that one stands. Happy to take any comments or questions about the update.
Any comments or questions from commissioners? Barry.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Madam Chair. Through you to Patrick. Patrick, with the BPAC thing, just two things that kind of are flagging up. Are we talking about additional signage? Are we talking about changing signs? Are we talking about removing signs? I'm a little curious just to begin to understand that a bit when we're dealing with the bike paths.
Sure, and this is good. So I think maybe we can talk about three different elements, right? And I probably needed to do a better job of separating these out. The first element is the signs that face the shared use paths of bicyclists and walkers at intersections. Right now, there's stop signs on some paths. The problem is that nobody complies with these, particularly cyclists. They go right across, and because if you're a motorist at an approach, you expect the bicyclist to stop, but they might not. That creates a point of conflict. It's generally not considered a best practice anymore to have those stop signs unless if you're at a major intersection, because the safe systems approach is really about acknowledging that the users will make mistakes, and sometimes users will choose to make mistakes, but that those mistakes should not result in loss of life or limb. And so that's sort of the rationale for that. Associated with that is the addition of stops at vehicular approaches to shared use paths. So where a roadway with an adjacent shared use path intersects a minor street, those minor streets would receive a stop sign. And that was passed at annual town meeting, I believe a year or two. I have to check, but it was a year or two ago. And we're just now getting around to implementing that. The third item, which maybe I'm misunderstanding, you might be asking about any kind of signage related to etiquette or speeds. We haven't really gotten to that point with BPAC related to how to manage or regulate micromobility devices. I'm not sure what they will recommend to you all or to the select board based on the review of different options. What we found out to date is that the town does have the authority to regulate on its own layout. So we could impose a speed limit. The challenge becomes enforcing that. And if you're setting up sort of a regulation where there's no stick, if you will, to kind of make sure that people are doing what we're asking them to do. Sort of the lowest hanging fruit that typically, I will tell you this, I think generally it's often a good approach to kind of start with the lowest hanging fruit. So maybe at really high volume stop locations like Rotary Park or, some of these side parks, put up some etiquette signage for people, see if that has any effect. One good suggestion that one of our BPAC members mentioned was, well, maybe when people rent bikes, they could get a little brochure with sort of some advice about how to operate on our roadways. Same with mopeds, even on our roadways, things like that, like working with our business community as well. And I'm not totally sure where that will go in regard to any actual signage. It may not go anywhere in regard to signage. It could be that the BPAC chooses to recommend a different approach.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to check because I know that whenever we do bike path design and implementation between the state and federal funding at this point, there's also mandates about signs as well too. And I just want to make sure that we're not compromising any of the funding that may be out there or has been awarded to us in terms of making those changes. And I think I'm hearing you say no.
Well, actually, it's a good question. There was a question from MassDOT about whether or not the signs on Milestone in particular were funded with state or federal aid. And so that's a question. If we do choose to remove them for consistency, we obviously need to get MassDOT's permission because it's their roadway. And we'd also want to be sure that we're complying with any kind of regulation related to how federal funds are used. But generally, if you have one approach on the majority of your shared use paths, you want to try to aim for consistency just to make sure that, people are following one framework. They only have to kind of think about one framework when they're using their bicycle or walking.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I mean, considering that, the better part of 90+% of our funding comes from both state and federal when we do this, that's pretty magnanimous and great. And I want to make sure that we're just not losing any way, shape, or form in terms of doing that. I've got one last thing I want to bring up because a lot of this seems to center on safety and stuff with BPAC. Has there been any thought about dealing with the helmet situation with bicyclists? I mean, this year especially, it seems like it's a very profound thing not to wear a helmet anymore. And that boggles my mind tremendously, especially having been in the healthcare industry where when an accident happens, and unfortunately, I've seen, pardon me for a minute, I'm going to digress here, seen enough squash rot to happen as well, too, where, it's just like, okay, free in the hair is great. But when you're having to deal with motorists as well, too, that is where, again, that's something that really needs to be considered. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that could be done with that, or is that something on the agenda for BPAC as well, too? Because I think it's risen to that level of it's time to have that discussion, just for the safety of all our motorists and our bicyclists in that situation. So thank you.
Right. We haven't addressed that directly yet, but we can certainly bring it to the next meeting as a point of NP and EDC interest.
Yeah, and hopefully my commissioners will agree with me that that is an issue that probably should be elevated up with them in terms of dealing with that somewhere in the near future.
Yeah, Barry, we talked about it. So we're just trying to figure out what at the next meeting, everyone's going to go back and do a little more research, but that was
Excellent.
Definitely one of the last comments we were talking about.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe and Barry. Going to Nat and then Seth.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Patrick, just one quick little thing. It's kind of an old idea from way back in the day that sort of I heard it or read it somewhere. I'm not sure who said it or who wrote it, but adopt a bike path concept. We have one of the biggest issues beyond the stop signs is the sight lines. I always talk about North Pasture Road is the one, when you come down North Pasture, if you don't stop for that, looking to the right, which you really can't kind of see, but people come down that hill because it's natural to go fast there. And you got to stop. I mean, you really do. You know, and I'm kind of a nutcase with this stuff, but not many people think like I do with that. And I'm sure, and that is a dangerous little spot. And I think that with all the landscapers we have and there's a lot of opportunity out there to get some sort of a local, sort of aesthetically pleasing Nantucket style program where someone can come and mow and cut back appropriately, neatly, nicely, and have something, some sort of little sign or something of their business, but at the same time, getting some of this stuff done and taking it out of the DPW a little bit when it comes to the smaller stuff. I'm not talking about cutting sides of roads. I'm talking just about actual sightline spots where the bike paths cross roads and all that kind of thing. That's just a thought I had that I thought I'd bring up because I brought it up years ago. I just don't remember when, but it was a long time ago. Jeff Follett was here. How long ago? Jeff Follett was here then. That's how long ago this was. So
I remember it
now. That's awesome. That's amazing, isn't it? So that's it. But I really appreciate what you're doing, Patrick, and getting all into the old stuff and the new stuff. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you, Nick. Go ahead, Seth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just on the topic of micromobility, I know I've spoken on this multiple times, but thank you, Patrick, for bringing this up with BPAC. I had hoped to attend their meeting, but I wasn't available at that point, but we'll try to attend the next one. I just want to make everyone aware too that there's some parallel processes going on and that we really should try for holistic planning. I sent a letter to the select board and I think that was ultimately sent around to this commission. And the select board, I believe, discussed some of this at their 10-12 meeting in the preliminary review of warrant articles. And then they may be doing that again this Wednesday. And I am prepared to attend and speak on this because it seems like the select board may consider sponsoring an article on this topic, especially since there was some talk that a citizen warrant article may come forward on an outright ban of micromobility devices, which obviously isn't, I think, a desired planning outcome. So I just would double down and suggest that we really spend appropriate town resources, and I'm willing to assist in any way that's needed to make sure that we give this the right amount of time and effort and planning so that we're not just haphazardly leaning into this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Any further comments related to the transportation manager's update? Next item on the agenda. So thank you, Patrick, for all of that information and your hard work. And we will move to the appointment of an NP and EDC representative to the Nantucket and Nantucket Harbor Plan Update Work Group. So we did receive a letter of interest. There was included in the packet an explanation of what the work group is going to be doing. Seth, do you want to speak to your interest?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am interested in serving as a representative for the Harbor Plan Update Committee. I think it's well within my wheelhouse as an ecologist and as somebody who's already pretty significantly invested in natural resources conservation on island. I'm personally a user of both the harbors as recreational fisher and shellfisher, kayaker, boater, etc. And I'd like to see us, well plan the future of the harbors. So I would put my name forward to be the representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Any other interested members of the commission? And if not, we'll take or any questions for Seth. But we're happy to have a volunteer. Thank you, Seth. We'll take a motion to appoint Seth. Excuse me, Barry, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Seth, have you had an opportunity to talk with staff about the various components that are involved with an area plan that needs to be done?
I'm sorry, Barry. This isn't an area plan. This is the harbors plan.
Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I apologize. I was thinking ahead on things at this point. No, the harbor plan, that's great. I retract my statement as quickly as I started it. My apologies.
Not to worry, Barry. We'll take a motion to appoint Seth as the NPNEDC representative to the Nantucket and Mattocket Harbors Update Plan Work Group.
So moved.
Make that,
So moved.
make that motion.
That's a very
Second,
popular motion.
I'll second Dave's motion.
I heard the motion first from Wendy. We'll take Nat as a second. Roll call vote. Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all, and thank you, Seth. Next item on the agenda, we have the Plus Department summer intern, Gail Bennett, here to do a data presentation. I think she has some good reminders for us. Gail, would you like to go ahead? And I don't know if you or Megan will be sharing the presentation on the screen.
Yeah, Megan, what's easiest for you?
It's probably easier if you share it, so that way you can kind of move along as you're presenting, but I'd be happy to, if it's easier for you, for me to do it.
No, I agree. 1 second.
You should have screen share permissions.
While you're getting ready, Gail, I do see we have a hand from John Kitchener. John, do you just want to let me know which item you wanted to comment on? Is it the data analytics or is it the previous harbor plan update committee?
I need to bring him over, so bear with me a second.
And my apologies, John, if I missed your hand from earlier.
No, it's okay. Madam Chair, it's actually not, it's just a comment. I would just like to say, as a member of the public, how refreshing it was to hear Patrick take us through what is a very complex set of, transport related issues in a way that he touched everything that was important in a way that us, the members of the public, can actually understand and, kind of understand what's going on and be comfortable with what's going on. So just really a thank you to Patrick. That's all it was.
Thank you, John. I appreciate your feedback. Okay. All right. Back to screen sharing.
Okay. Everyone can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Hi, so I am Gail Bennett, and I am just going to give a quick presentation on, like you just said, some good reminders. This is just all things data. So I was a information systems major at Stevens Institute of Technology, and I just graduated this past May, and I began working at the planning office as an intern on August 1st, and I'm pursuing a career in data science. So my main objective is to help the community understand data analytics by providing a knowledge and language-based foundation for productive discourse. This relates to some things that have already been said today. For example, when Patrick was presenting, he mentioned decision points for the stop sign, which streets need them the most and how we're gonna decide those things. And, the classic approach is to form a committee or a commission and kind of just extend the whole process because there's misunderstanding between everyone on what the problems actually are and like what types of answers we're looking for, because Nantucket's so unique where everything is a unique case. So just data in general, it's just like facts, and a lot of it is not straightforward, and it needs to be analyzed in order to be helpful. We give value to data. Data is not valuable at all, really, by itself. So that's why we have some data scientists and engineers. Something that's also super important that I'll address later down the road, but the systems optimization for the town government is a little bit like outdated, which was alluded to. It just is continuously alluded to in the conversations that take place. It's just because of the formalities and the slow pace of legal decisions in general. So the types of data analytics we are gonna all become super familiar with will be the predictive analytics. As of right now, there's not really acceptance of one source of data as true or accurate. And we're kind of at a standstill determining what measures we're going to use to determine that. And until we can store historical data, we won't be able to predict how any change, once implemented, will impact the island. And in order to have best practices for the information points and future scheduling, that's when prescriptive analytics come in, and that's really the gem. So forgive me because I just have so many thoughts about everything on these slides, but I sometimes get off topic. But anyway, so really our problem is dealing with uncertainty and error. And my first few days on the job, I was just reading a lot because I was unfamiliar with the necessary terminology. I didn't understand really what abutting was, abutting a property, and that's obviously integral to zoning language. So, I had to kind of double down and try and understand things as best as I could. So, because if I can't have the same foundation that you all have, I'm not being as valuable as I can. And I won't really be able to have the same experience. And I don't really need to know all of the island's history to be helpful. That is kind of my conclusion, because if other people can learn how to identify like insightful data points from past surveys or from past projects. For example, the street light Nantucket write-up, it really was lacking specifics, and it was not even edited to appear cohesive. And sometimes when there are presentations discussing difficult problems like that we don't have the conceptual understanding for, we kind of just tune out and then remember about one thing and then just rely on that person to have that ground covered, because it doesn't really get communicated well. And that really prohibits fast progression. So I'd say that Nantucket is kind of in the reactive decision-making category. We're really just responding to not only public concern and past projects that are, you know, already in motion. There is the holistic planning. That phrase was nice because that is actually the phrase I was looking for when I was trying to describe how to conceptualize the types of data that we have available. So the town has a lot and it's hard to digest, and it's very hard to even just see because everything's just numbers on the screen, and when there aren't helpful graphs, it can be super difficult. I know for me, I'm a visual learner and I get super particular with colors and whatnot, because it actually is really important. I think sometimes the disconnect between a business that is, or a organization that is not for profit and a for-profit company is the incentive to grow at a rapid pace to keep up with like future goals, usually financial gains. And so you take more risks and you don't really have the option to not, but the government is in a different realm where they are always going to be dealing with the same exact problems. So they kind of have large windows, like sometimes, you know, anywhere from like 3 years to 50 years, you know, implementing changes that were designed at a point in time when they're no longer even really relevant when they come to fruition. And that's because of the errors in logic. We don't, especially with new age technology, I think there is a chance to just be a little bit hesitant to spend large sums of money on experimental pursuits, because at the end of the day, the planning office, the planning board, everyone here needs to solve, or they're expected to solve an optimization problem that no one can solve. There's actually a really interesting computer science problem called the traveling salesman that illustrates the concept really well. It's just big data is changing the future, but we can't keep up with it at all. So the study inception I'll come back to. So the errors in communication, that is what I was addressing earlier when I was talking about kind of our knowledge backing. Like even I showed someone this, I was meeting with Matt Fee to just meet with the select board member and go through this presentation, and then P hacking, you saw it, and I didn't have on the screen probability hacking right next to it. And so then you kind of just, you read the definition and it kind of makes sense. But once I say, yeah, the P stands for probability, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, for sure. But sometimes those little clues they're overlooked. And if everyone is going to understand something, there must be various ways of engagement, because not everyone learns the same ways. And that's kind of like the psychological component of this. What marketing experts would bring to the table for economic development progress plan, like probably very useful skills. And I think that we just need to be putting on these hats so that we can switch from different lenses in order to see the problem from a lot of different points of view. I think that the Historical Commission and the Land Bank might kind of understand where I'm coming from, because they have to decide to always act or omit action on any land decision point that comes to be, and that will later determine the public perception of future decisions if they are contradictory. And it's all just, what did we do before for this specific problem? We have to do the same thing, or that didn't work out, let's do something different. Where is the in-between area? And you need to be addressing that. So big data is like the Internet of Things. You have probably all heard IoT, Internet of Things. And it's just rapidly expanding data production, and the storage for this type of data is something we haven't been able to optimize yet at all. And that has to do with computer processing, and it's very expensive to iterate through infinitely generated bits, and it's very hard to tell in the beginning phase. So like earlier I said that we're in the reactive phase. You can't really tell. It's like when you're in that phase, there's not anything other than real-time analytics. And that can be as helpful as it can be for real-time decisions. But you can't look at those past historical trends and use your reasoning and your hindsight bias. So what if, there are combined projects, or what about all of the surveys and other dished out, they're supposed to generate some sort of information that this decision-making team can use for a step in one project that everyone here is dealing with. And like, what if there was just one survey and actually everyone filled it out and it was really well done and everyone understood from the beginning, if the answer is this, this is what it means for us based on what we're going to be doing with it before we even send it out. So that's the study inception, which can be, kind of hit or miss and make it or break it, because if you don't start off the bat in a good place, especially with a leadership style that takes input from all directions, it just, the environment loses a lot of potential. So I'm just gonna skip through these slides because they kind of just describe what big data is, but it can be helpful to look at later if you're interested. So that's the end of my presentation. Does anyone have questions?
Thank you, Gail. Any questions from commissioners for Gail?
And I also am willing to go through this with anyone again sometime.
Well, thank you, and best of luck in whatever your next adventure is with big data.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda, we have Bill Greeter here. Just for clarity, he is not a member of the Nantucket Area Plan Work Group, but he has been authorized by them to give us an update on the progress of that area plan. And then we will also ask to appoint a representative from NPNEDC to the Nantucket Area Plan Work Group.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for clarifying that I'm not a sitting member of the Nantucket Area Plan Committee. I am the president of the Nantucket Conservation Association, and our MAP committee came from our organization. Since some of the newer members of NPEDC may not be familiar with the committee's efforts, I'm just going to give you a brief update. As noted in our letter to the NPECD on December the 7th, 2020, the existing Nantucket Area Plan was approved by your commission in 2006. In the last 14 years, we know there's been changes in zoning maps, Board of Health regs, and the Nantucket Harbor watershed. Our area plan needs updating to include zoning changes like VR, MMD, expanded VHOD, new regulations in swimming pools in VR, in the expanded Nantucket Harbor Watershed Protection District. Maintaining Nantucket's low density nature remains a constant wish of this section of the island. Additional pressures on this end of the island include active coastal erosion, stormwater leaching from the landfill, maintaining drinking water quality, and meeting the TMDL requirements from the state. These issues obviously require thoughtful planning for at least the next 10 years. MCA came before this commission in March 2001 to get approval for the members of the MAP work group, which we received, and also submitted new possible map boundary tweaks, which was taken under consideration and not approved. Since then, the MAP work group has had several posted public meetings according to protocol. The committee makeup is very diversified. We have year-round residents, seasonal residents, and a commercial property owner. So if you drill down, we have 6 year-round residents, 5 seasonal residents, a member of the Fishers Landing Association, a representative of the Nantucket Land Council, the Nantucket Conservation Foundation, the Nantucket Land Bank, Linda Loring Foundation, and to be named at this point, I guess today, a representative from this commission. There's been an outreach to the general public. MCA has over 400 members, and the need to update the area plan and the process has been presented to our members in various articles in our newsletters. The updated process was also presented at our July 22 annual meeting that had over 95 attendees. The MAP committee subcommittee is in the process of gathering information from folks in the West End. The first survey was sent out and responses qualified. Those results are available for viewing by the public on the Nantucket Conservation Association website, which is nantucketconservation.org. The second survey is in the draft stage and will be sent out upon completion. The preliminary observations, I'll just give you a recap, is because the Nantucket landscape has changed dramatically since 2006, we anticipate the possible need to tweak some of the boundaries to reflect those changes. The committee has identified 3 possible areas for consideration. The Linda Loring track. Over the years, that foundation has been actively monitoring residential changes, and they're interested in working with the area to work in conjunction with them as they work to protect their property. The Fishers Landing group became interested, although they have specific covenants and restrictions and zoning regs included in their homeowners association to protect their holdings. They're now subject to the changes in the Nantucket Harbor watershed growth that was done, the district, as well as the newly enacted Board of Health septic mandates for IA systems. We also included the possibility of the Nantucket landfill tract, which the town may or may not want to include, but it was thought, trying to be all inclusive, that we they at least put that on the discussion list for purposes of just general discussion. Over the last several years at our annual meetings, we've heard from the Nantucket residents they want low density or try to maintain low density. We as a group believe that's confirmed or governed by 2 sets of regulations: zoning board codes governing land use, setbacks, etc., and the Board of Health regulations in sensitive need areas governing bedrooms. The extension of sewer to Monomoy was an eye-opener as far as more structures per lot, larger homes, more density. So that's obviously something that the MAP group wants to discuss and look at, and to see what can be done to facilitate trying to maintain low density. The group is very responsive to input from folks that they've gotten on the surveys. There's a lot of dialogue with anyone that wants to have dialogue over something as exciting as a Nantucket area plan. So that's where that group is. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
I mean, I'll go first, I guess.
And then we'll go to Barry.
Madam Chair. So Bill, hey, thank you for being here, etc. So 2006, the area plan was done in 2009, the zoning changes. I just want to kind of get people up to speed a little bit on a few things that you missed and a few things that you didn't. So the area plan was done in 2006, but the zoning changes for VR, all that R20 that was out there got changed to Lug 1 and some VR in 2009 during the the tennis club application. That didn't happen, but that's when they brought water, and it was a sort of a joint effort to get water out there. That zoning got changed before the water got out there. So and then of course, you know, the II system started coming in as part of the, you know, regs, Board of Health, etc., groundwater, whatever. And I just want to just say, low density, that Nantucket is kind of right now sort of kind of like Monomoy, where it's sort of like there isn't a way to really reduce development other than obviously keeping sewer out of there, which nobody's proposed that from planning at all. I don't know how that all sort of kind of wound up the way it did, but I'm certainly not in favor of it, that's for sure. You've already done enough out there with the IIs. You have water now, which you needed years ago. I'd have to, you know, I don't know what Andrew and Leslie have in mind as far as any future tweaking of zoning out there, but I mean, it's been kind of already fixed. So I don't know what we could do to make it less dense than it is now. But I think it came out good as far as what could have happened out there with water and leaving those 1 acre lots in R20, that's for sure. So that's all I have. And thank you, Bill, again for bringing this in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. We'll go to Barry.
I'll defer for a minute. I just want to see if any of the other commissioners have anything before I jump in.
Right, I don't have any hands up, but does anybody else have a comment? Barry, why don't you go ahead?
So thank you. No, I appreciate that. So Bill, thanks. It's good to have you back, and I appreciate that Nantucket. It's time to make a revisit here, especially with, you know, some of the things that have been occurring and we're seeing in the media and stuff. Just a few things that come to mind. Has anyone from MAP had the discussion with the Plus staff about readdressing boundaries out there? Because usually that's one of the first things that happens as we begin to say, okay, we're going to do something, we're going to do an area plan, and then we negotiate the boundaries. So has that happened yet, or is that in the wings to do it?
That's in the wings. The first couple of meetings that were held was basically organizational meetings, getting approval for the members themselves, and to set up the framework. And then the dreaded influence of COVID hit. And so, but in that interim, rather than mark time, the MAP committee started to gather information that was going to be needed regardless of what directions they went. And so they've been working, developing the surveys, and they have I guess the polite way is to say it is borrowed, but they've stolen some of the ideas that were done in the Monomoy plan, which was very extensive, the Sconset plan, as well as the Surfside plan. for leading type questions and they also took information that's been gathered from our annual meetings, which even during COVID, we did that over Zoom, and we had over 120 people via Zoom. Our meetings are well attended. There's a smattering of renters. There's a smattering of seasonal owners. There's a smattering of year-rounders. And so we didn't want to lose time because the government process moves slow enough as it is without not doing anything by the worker bees. So they've gone ahead and that's where we are right now. My understanding is that with an appointment from somebody from this group, that'll help move the process into the wheelhouse that Plus is looking to do. But we thought that we needed to do a lot of legwork so that when the Plus staff is involved, they aren't sitting there spinning their wheels for 3 hours and at the end say, well, you didn't do this, this, or this, or whatever. So they're trying to be proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah. Now, thank you. I just would urge very quickly for that meeting to take place, though, with the Plus staff, and then ultimately through us, because if there are boundary lines to be renegotiated out there, as with any area plan that goes before the Planning and Economic Development Commission, those boundary lines need to either be determined or redetermined under which to do it. So I definitely say that needs to take place, I'd probably say, before you go too much further. Case in point, with the thing that we're hearing about sewer and stuff, it begs the question, for instance, like Warren's Landing. Do they need to be part of that? Do they need to be their own entity to things? So that's what I'm saying. I won't disagree with you. This needs to be done, but before too much information is brought together, at least in my humble opinion, I think it's time to have that discussion so that we're all understanding what does that really look like and where exactly are we talking about, and that there's that agreement that tends to have to happen with it. So that's my 2 cents, and thanks for listening. But I'm thrilled to see you doing it. I really am.
Well, we agree. That's why at the onset we said if it were to expand, for example, the look didn't go towards Eel Point. The look, we tried to stay within what we called the Nantucket general area, because there's a question of where does Nantucket really begin. The town keeps calling it the Nantucket landfill. It's really the Nantucket landfill.
Right.
You don't get into a sign that says the Village of Nantucket until you're almost to Oakland Street, which is, halfway through the community. So we agree, and we know full well that any tweaking has to come through this group. There's a whole process. So we just did selectively and as fine-tuned as possible any possible areas, and that's why we included Fish's Landing. At first, when they were queried through their board, they said, no, we're okay. But then in discussions with us, they didn't realize that they were under the Board of Health regs for the IA system. Because the Board of Health is considered Warren's Landing is Nantucket. They didn't realize that they were in the Harbor Watershed District. They said, oh, we're going to get out of that. I said, well, good luck with that, because that's just not happening. And so that's why they're participating with the understanding that, they are protected with all the things that I described, but they want to at least have dialogue so they know what's going on. And they want to have some input. So that's why we included them. Same with Linda Loring's group. So those are really the only stretches of the existing Nantucket area plan layout. I can assure you, it wasn't done in a vacuum. It wasn't done thinking that it was going to happen. But it was trying to flag it, do our due diligence, put it all out on the table and say, okay, this is what we found. This is what we heard from the residents. This is what we heard from some seasonal folks. And what's the best process going forward. So I appreciate your concern, and it's one shared by the group.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. I forgot to mention Diana Brown, who is the chair of the Nantucket Area Plan Work Group, was invited tonight but had a conflict. So thank you very much to Bill for letting us go forward with this topic.
No, thank you for letting me go. We didn't want to miss a chance to kick this can down the road because the MAP group didn't have somebody available. So, we're all getting long in the tooth, and we'd like to see something happen before, the horse leaves the barn.
Thank you, Bill. So on the subject of appointing a representative, do we have an interested volunteer?
Madam Chair, I'd like to put my name forward.
Thank you, Joe. Joe, do you want to speak to your interest?
Well, my parents have land out there we've gone out there almost every weekend, fishing, taking off. My grandfather originally bought the property, and so Nantucket's very special to me. I'm every other week on my bike riding through there and just really enjoy that part of town Nantucket. It is unchanged, and we always thought once we went over the first bridge, we were in Wisconsin. Once we heard the rumbling of the wooden bridge at that time, so I just really have had a special place in my heart for Nantucket. So I really would like to work with Bill, and I've been on his email chain for, I want to say, the last 7 or 8 years whenever he started it. So I'm fairly familiar with what's going on there. But yeah, I just really enjoy that part of the island. I'd like to help them out and be a connection between Andrew's office, the Plus Department, and Nantucket Association. So
Great, thank you, Joe. Art, do you have a question?
great.
No, seeing no other interest, I would make a motion to nominate Joe.
I'd second that.
Thank you, Bert and Barry, for seconding. Any further discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Bert Johnson,
Aye.
Nat Lowell,
Aye.
Barry Rector,
Aye.
Joe Topham,
Aye, and thank you, everyone.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much for having us, and thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you,
Thank
Bill.
Bill.
Talk to you soon.
All right, so moving the item H, the next item on our agenda is an update on the 2023 budget. And I assume Andrew is going to take us through that.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So each year we try to give you at least an early, just I guess, a view of the budget as we're submitting it. In our bylaws, we talk about, and this is something that needs to be updated, the NP and EDC approving a budget. However, we haven't had an actual separate NP and EDC budget for some time. It's really been merged with the budget really for the Plus office. So basically we have a level funded budget except for what are called EIRs, which are expense increase requests, and we've included those in the budget. If anyone has any questions or deep concerns about them, this is the chance to express that. There are basically 5 requests for the current fiscal year. 4 of them have to do with staff, and 1 is for a vehicle, which we're actually going to repeal that since because of COVID, there's outstanding authorization for 2 new vehicles, which would replace, I think it's a 2004 and a 2007 vehicle that we have. In terms of the staff, we have a request to increase our overtime budget, which has consistently been high, partly because of ongoing vacancies in existing positions. I don't want to jinx it, but right now we are fully staffed. But as you all know, we have statutory requirements, and if that have to be met, and we basically frequently have to put people on to make sure that those things get done. We have not seen a reduction in either applications or activity at Plus, either from the COVID time or afterwards. 2 existing positions we have put for reclassification to a higher level because of increased responsibility. And those are the energy coordinator and the historic police position, the historic planner. Those would move into a more senior level based on, again, much higher levels of responsibility. And they're currently at a lower staff position. So again, this puts them at a more equal level. Also, we have put back on the docket the refilling of the senior planner position. As you know, that position has been vacant. Leslie, when did you start? I think since you left that position.
It's since 2012.
So it was actually funded prior to onslaught of COVID, and that position was eliminated due to uncertainty about what the impact would be from potential downturn. So we are advocating that that position be refilled. Those are the highlights of the budget. The deadline has already passed for submission of that. But if there's any questions or any concerns, I'd certainly like to hear from you.
Any comments or questions from commissioners regarding the budget? Andrew, a clarification. So the agenda says the 2023 budget. So is that fiscal year beginning in 2023 that we're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay.
In July.
Yeah, sorry, it is. It's
Yeah.
It's July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024.
Great, thank you. If there are no comments or questions, the next item on the agenda is a discussion regarding the Plus agreement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item is on your agenda. There has been some discussion, which I believe you may be aware of, regarding the Historic District Commission, and one of the HDC members proposing to remove the HDC from the jurisdiction of the Plus agreement. At this point, it's here to make sure that you as a signer of that agreement, which dates from 2012, are aware of what's being discussed. If you had any feedback, we certainly would want to hear from you. Again, it's uncertain that the full HDC has actually taken a vote on this at this time. It's something that we'll certainly keep you apprised of. We're not certain that an actual warrant article is necessary, considering that the Plus agreement was entered into by the Select Board and the Planning Commission. So, as you may remember, at one point, the Plus agreement did include the Health Department under a prior director, and at that time, once a new manager was hired for that department, the Health Department was moved out of the Plus oversight by unanimous consent of all parties. So again, just to make sure you all knew about it. And if anybody had any comments, now would be the opportunity to express it.
Any comments or questions from commissioners? Barry?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Madam Chairman. Last month, back in September, I had made a motion at that point that was adopted by the board to begin that very dialogue between PLUS, HDC, NPDDC, town manager, and there's been little traction on it. I'm fine. You know, if the HDC feels as though they want to separate themselves from PLUS, you know, I think we should help facilitate that process as quickly and as rapidly as possible. I'm not getting the sense anyone wants to really step up to the plate to do this. But what I am concerned with is some of the way people are treating it and some of the dialogue that's been behind it. You know, certainly as this whole thing started up, you know, we had made multiple requests to have the chair of the HDC show up. And frankly, I don't understand the unwillingness to do it and have that level of discussion. I'm kind of surprised by that. You know, some of the things that I'm hearing about some of the narratives that are out there are kind of distressing. For instance, you know, I hear that, you know, there's basically that there's understaffing, and I have to admit that I would be one of the first ones to say that with PLUS, one, the department was that department was very much professionalized at this point. And considering where they were and where they are today, they've brought on what I'd consider some of the three best individuals that I have seen out there at this point, including Holly Backus. I feel like just kind of watching how things proceed as well too. The staff is really underappreciated, and I find that somewhat distressing as well. I mean, if there's valid concerns to it, that's one thing, but I have seen nothing more than what I would describe as a very top-notch behavior from her with dealing with some of that stuff. I think there's been a lot of miscommunication that's been occurring about Chapter 340A, which is its own. That to me is another story unto itself, which is absolutely fascinating. But I think without understanding that story, people are just glomming onto it and saying, here we go, that's the answer to everything at this point. I think there's a lot of things that kind of need to be worked out within that commission. And I was kind of hoping that with where we were tracking to, that some of that would begin to happen. You know, for instance, the appointments that they were doing were completely internalized. And that's one of the first boards I've ever seen where that's happened. And it really wasn't a very transparent process in my book. Every other commission or every other board has a very deliberate way of dealing with, you know, those kind of things, but I wasn't seeing that here. And staff has not been getting what I would call really fair treatment, I don't think. I think that a lot of the dialogue that takes place is meant to be highly charged and politicized to move this ahead. And I'm having a bit of a problem with that because it is a one-sided dialogue that is I feel at times not very well vetted out, nor is it filled with fact, but it's filled with certain things to try to get that process done. Now, personally, when I start seeing all that happen, it's like, okay, either we sit down and we discuss it, which hasn't happened, or we finally just come to a point of like, okay, enough is enough. And I'd say enough is enough here at this point. And, you know, the velocity and trajectory that the HDC wants to take this is abundantly apparent. So I'd like to at least start the process at this point, which can be done with the town manager, to begin that separation process before we even get there. Let Plus segregate back out, which will take things out, and town management, just like they did with the Board of Health, can undertake that as they see fit. But that's the direction I would strongly suggest we head, and I think the time is now instead of later. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. We'll go to Nat and then Joe.
Hi, thank you, Mary. Look, I'm not gonna, I actually don't agree with Barry, although I do know why he's saying what he's saying, and he's right about the moving parts, but this is what I say. Has anyone identified the problem? I haven't heard anyone say what the problem is, number one. That Plus office is like going into the Athenaeum for the town. Everybody there knows what they're doing. They all work together. They cross over each other, you know, as far as cross training and all that. Can you guys hear me? Because my video just blipped out on me somehow. I'm not sure what to do next here. Can you
Your
guys hear
audio
me
is
okay?
fine, Nat. Yep, your audio is
Okay,
fine.
great. That's all that matters. Thank you so much, Mary. I'm sorry. This issue should not be about whose side someone's on. It should be about what works best for Nantucket and those who use the services, which is anyone who owns property. The HDC is the busiest of all the regulatory boards simply because of the nature of the way the applications and the law and the bylaws are in Nantucket for what requires an HDC approval. And that's how I feel. I think it needs to stay the way it is, with improvements that need to be made if they can be. There needs to be a dialogue with at least the chair, or you know, the whole HDC and staff, and figure this out, because quite frankly, I don't see anything broken. And I certainly don't think we're going to be building a building for the HDC or adding them to the trailer at the old fire station. I mean, where are they going to go? Are they going to stay there? Are they going to leave? I mean, the staff that we have is fantastic. I mean, what are we going to do? Just get new people to figure this all out? I mean, it doesn't work that way. So I don't think that's really a secret. So that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. We'll go to Joe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I agree with Nat. I don't think that they should be moved out of the building or breaking off to some separate organization or anything like that. I feel that this is a knee-jerk reaction to the advisory boards. And from my personal experience being in front of those advisory boards several times a month, I really think they have a weakness. I think they were inconsistent in evaluating areas. The meetings were very capricious, arbitrary. There were times when I would meet with the board and they would then change decisions or add on. You know, if I had one or two issues to address, I would get to a meeting before.
So Joe, pardon me for interrupting. I think we're a little bit off topic to discuss.
No, I know, but I'm just bringing up that there's a reason for that, the HCC for wanting to break out, and it's the advisory board. So, you know, I just feel that that's the crux of it. And I, as someone that brings in applications, not that it's a huge concern, but you go to the planning board or the Board of Health first and you bring your application, then you have to bring it over to the Plus department. And I just think that they should all be in one building. I don't care if they're separated, but my also belief is that the HCC staff does an exemplary job. The entire Plus department, I think, that has really done a great job, and each time they're getting better and better year by year, and staff by staff member by staff member. And I think that that's really great. Do I think the HCC members would need an extra helping hand? Yeah, I definitely think that that's a necessity. Whether they raise a certain percentage to get that extra staffer or two, I think that that would be necessary. But I just feel that this is a political move and someone's trying to make an issue. And I think that if you're going to bring back the advisory boards, then you need to restructure them, because I think that there was a lot of problems there. But that's what the HTC is having the problem with. That's the whole crux of why they want to move. And I don't know if it's a, you know, I don't think they've ever taken a vote, but I do know there's a majority of the HTC that would like to do this. But I personally don't agree with this, and nor would I back them to break free from the Plus Department. I think that everything needs to be the way it is moving, and maybe just some minor tweaks or adjustment. But I think that that's not really a smart move on our part. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I want to go to Don first and then Dave.
Thank you, Mary. I'm really concerned about this move. I think that it will create extreme inefficiencies in the way the public is serviced. I'm not sure what the actual proposal is in terms, there really hasn't been a full identification of where the HDC is thinking that they're going to land and who's going to be their staff. I worked in the HDC back before things were as they are now. And as a user of the Plus Department, I think there's great efficiency. And I think that there's really exemplary staff with Holly Backus and everyone else who's in admin there. If anything, the HDC could focus a little bit more about streamlining their actual process, because the way they're reviewing applications is causing inefficiency and how much they've been backed up. And we all have to remember that we're all in these positions to serve the community. So if there's something that can really be identified that would improve the service to the community, I'm more than willing to listen to that. But those are the kind of things I would be looking to hear. And another thing is that there is no other office space for this to be separate, and for it to be in the same building and with a entirely separate staff that can't do any crossover. Again, another extreme inefficiency. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a knee-jerk reaction instead of a thoughtful solution to a problem. I think and I don't want to carry on too long because I think everyone's pretty much said it. I think to think that HDC lives outside the building department just is not a streamlined, good, efficient government move here. No one's really verbalized what the real issue is here and why we would make that move, other than they weren't happy with the decision that was made. So I, like many others on the board, are not for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I'll add my perspective as chair of the NP&EDC, and that is that until there is a specific proposal, which should come from the HDC, I don't see that the NP&EDC is the appropriate body to take the first step on this question. I would be concerned if the HDC wanted to remove staff from the Plus Department. I think that that could affect the Plus Department's other services. And so that would be my first major point of concern. But really, you know, I think it's fine to consider efficiencies. It's fine to consider assignments. It's fine to look at the way that the Plus Department operates in service of the HDC, but anything that is specific to the HDC's internal workings should come from them or should come from parties that are directly involved. And I don't see the NP&EDC as directly involved in those efforts. That's my opinion as chair, and I'm certainly willing to follow the pleasure of the commission as well. Dave, and then Barry. Or Dave, is your hand still up from the previous comment?
I mean, I didn't put my hand down. I'm sorry.
Okay. Barry, go ahead.
Yes, I'm lowering it. Thank you. Frozen up.
Sorry, I'm just waiting a second with the background. I think someone left their mic open in it early. Listen, let me just run through a few things to begin with. I personally, I don't want to go here. I really don't.
I don't.
You've got to understand that, okay? But a few things I'd like to address. First of all, yeah, the NP and EDC is involved through the plus agreement. So there's the linkage between the two. That's part of what is going on with why we would be entering into this fray. You know, I've heard things like they're the busiest committee. No doubt about it. But if just as an external viewer and having done this with the planning board, there are definitely ways to streamline the processes that are going on. Whether there's the political will to do it is a whole different thing. And there were times that I had heard from some of the commissioners that there was no political will to do it. Okay, fine. But I'm one for, you know, listen, everyone's time is precious. And, you know, the ability to, I don't want to hear they're busy, but they don't want to do anything to streamline that process to try to do it. Yeah, it's a knee-jerk reaction, but as a healthcare professional, that knee has been jerking for several months now, and I might take it a little bit beyond a knee jerk. And that is part of the concern as well, too. The fact that it is politicized, it continues to be politicized, and it's not only been going on short period, it will run itself out. But I'm not hearing that. It continues to be pushed, ramped, and elevated. And I wish that would come to an end. I think that there's been offers out there to try to just even have a dialogue to begin to understand what the heck is going on. But again, there's not that will to have parties meet under which to do it. When I made that motion, I was dead serious because I love to problem solve. And I love to get to the heart of the matter. And sometimes, you know what? Even amidst all that, I can be proven wrong, and that's okay. I'm good with that because I learn from those things. But without that level of dialogue taking place, we're left in kind of a vacuum here, and that's what I'm concerned with. You know, things like they need office space and stuff, that really can be worked out. There's a little more space than we're giving ourselves credit for here within the town complex. Doesn't mean things wouldn't have to be shifted around, but I'm not going to accept that as a reason why we shouldn't be doing it. Office space really can be had. But it's time for dialogue. It's time to see if we can resolve, I think, as a number of commissions, boards, it's time to try to resolve this and come to a process that doesn't take it through this whole political quagmire of bringing it to town meeting and, you know, say, you know, standing on our laurels and saying, oh, we're right, and no one else. I don't want politics. I really don't. I prefer the human approach to these things, but I'm not walking away with a really firm sense of that. And like I said, given my druthers, I got enough else going on at this point. I don't want to get into the quagmire of things, but you know, that takes two to tango with as well too. So anyways, thanks for listening, and I really appreciate you all dialoguing about this and hearing some of your thoughts. They're not lost on me. They're not lost on me. But please understand too, for me to be bringing this up isn't just a trivial moment in my book under which to do it. And it's really not a matter of politicizing it either. I think it's just coming to some recognition about some things that are going on there and not wanting to keep putting it to the side. anyways, thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Barry. Nat, further comment?
Just a quick one, follow up a little bit on Barry and the others. I just feel that staying above the fray is the way to go. You know, just I agree with what Barry said about going to town meeting. I can tell you that's the last thing we need to be doing for this type of situation, because it's just it's unproductive, and not enough people understand the real story is just it's a working office that deals with multiple things, and it's all related to building and property. And that's it, like Joe said. I mean, Joe's right on the money. So I just like to call it the Athenaeum for nostalgic purposes, even though it's the old electric company. It is very, very warm and friendly when you go in, and they take care of people, and that's what we're supposed to do, as John said. So that's all I have. I don't know what are we looking for here, through you, Mary, to Andrew or Leslie. Are we looking for some sort of a vote of sort of a sense of the meeting, sense of the board type of vote, or is this something different?
I would say that we are on record as wanting to be involved in the decision-making process. I'm not aware that Andrew was looking for a motion, but Andrew, you can certainly give us your.
I'm just asking. I don't know. This is like one of those kind of, mysterious ones. I'm not sure what exactly we need to do, or nothing at all. I don't know.
Yeah. Andrew?
So.
Sure. I spoke with the town manager today, and she wanted me to basically check in with her after we had this discussion and there was a little bit more feedback. So
okay,
I've gotten that, and thank you all. I will Barry, I've not ignored your motion. But I did need to get a little bit more information before, trying to set up some sort of response. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Barry?
Yeah, no, and Andrew, I appreciate that. I listen, I didn't want to fast track that decision. I didn't even want to make that decision, to be very truthful. And if it takes some time to begin to work those things out, I'm the first one to say, great. But at least there's forward momentum here. And that's really what I was hoping to have achieved in the process, is to get some forward momentum with those things. So thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Any further comments or questions on this topic?
Yeah, Mary?
Yes, Bert.
Yeah, I agree with you that the cart on the wrong side of the horse here. They should be instituting some sort of an action that they want to take, not us telling them what to do.
Great.
They should be leading. If they want to change, they should be leading their program to change.
Thank you, Bert. Any other comment? All right, seeing none. Next item on the agenda is a discussion of the NPNEDC enabling legislation.
Madam Chair, I see a hand in the attendees.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. John Kitchener.
Sorry. So, Madam Chair, having said what I said about Patrick, I don't want to sound like I'm the cheerleader of the night. But with that said, I go to the Plus office maybe 6 or 8 times a year. And one thing I'm always struck by is these folks help one another, and when I go in, like I won't give you the example, but I went in last week with a problem, and the lady at the desk didn't really know how to solve it, but somebody came from the back and immediately solved it. So I just want to say, whenever we're talking about Plus, I can only say that as a member of the public, my experience there is they're a very nice small group of people who seem to want to help anybody who walks through the door.
Thank you, John. I'm sure that is appreciated by all the Plus employees. And I'll say I have had similar experiences there. Billy Cassidy also has a hand up. Billy?
Yes, hi, Madam Chair. I would just like to second what Mr. Kitchener just said. Very appropriate and very true. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. Okay, moving on, let me introduce the topic of the NP and EDC enabling legislation. So as I'm sure we all remember, there was an article at town meeting last year which proposed changes to the legislation. I want to make it clear that tonight what we're doing is we're being introduced to some of the background and some of the options that are available to us regarding the enabling legislation and any changes we might want to make. But our starting point is not the proposal that was presented at town meeting, which was the work of one individual primarily. Our starting point should be all of the possibilities that are open to us and all of the needs that the town of Nantucket has. So just keeping that in mind, but also noting that we are following up as requested at town meeting, and this will be a continuing discussion topic. The objective tonight is to give everybody some background so that they can think about what opportunities we might want to pursue in terms of any changes to the enabling legislation or to our goals. With that said, Andrew is going to take us through some notes that he's prepared. And Andrew, do you want to share those on the screen?
Yes, if we could, if Megan, you could.
And while that's going up, I want to recommend the history that was included at the end of that packet item. Mostly relevant to Martha's Vineyard, but also to Nantucket. Is certainly a lot of it before my time, and I know I'm not the youngest person on this board. And I'll further add that there was a reference to a book called No Island is an Island, and I happen to have a copy of that, and I read it over the weekend, and I highly recommend that to anybody who's interested. Again, it focuses on Martha's Vineyard, but I had the feeling that it could have been written this year about Nantucket instead of 50 years ago. So I thought it was very timely and very helpful for understanding how we got to where we are and what we're facing right now. Andrew, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I basically last week, Leslie and I attended a conference in northern New England, which was very interesting about planners and their work in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. So we had a chance to sort of, talk about basically to go back to the roots of our own legislation, and some of this is following up on earlier materials that I had sent you about some of the historical background and everything, but I'm going to try to walk everyone through this so we've all at least heard it at the same time. So I guess first and foremost, again, we didn't have a lot of time to talk about, the more broader question of, why amend the legislation? And I think, one of the premises I think that we all need to agree on is that amending the legislation is a major effort and should be carefully considered. So, sending in home rule petitions are a big deal. And I really think there should be some clear buy-in to the reasons we're doing it. So that leads to why amend the legislation. Is it addressing a specific problem? And if it is, what is it? What is the problem? There's clearly a need, and I think, this was discussed before, to modernize, to remove outdated practices and language, to remove confusion and provide clarity. This has all been raised before, to match existing practices or to expand or contract functions or duties. Restructuring is also certainly part of why to amend the legislation to improve effectiveness, inclusion, or other goals. Again, what are those? Factors influencing when this is done. So what is the urgency? And again, priority, where does this stand in all of the other work that we're doing? The timing is important. What else is being requested? what other home rule petitions are up before the state? And is it timing wise in terms of transitions, which there may be certain transitions coming that should be recognized, and that may be a good time to consider amendments. So the other question that came up, which was interesting, is where oral petitions have been our course of action, where an actual article is brought to town meeting and voted on. We did learn at our last discussion regarding the fertilizer issue from Mr. Giorgio that the regional planning agencies can submit direct requests to the legislature. So again, that was a different than our usual practice, but it is something that came up out of those discussions. So what that means is if that is a choice, then it's not necessarily ruled by the calendar and the sort of the timeline of our town meeting. To review the existing legislation, which has 5 basic sections, and I paraphrased these. So if there's any question about that, that's where they came from. So section 1 is the name, the mission, composition. I note that the word planning is used in 9 of the current 13 RPAs, including our own. Both the Cape and Vineyard have just shortened that to Cape Cod Commission, Martha's Vineyard Commission. I will say ours is one of the longest and most that's frequently mentioned by people having both Planning and Economic Development Commission. And again, there's a history to why that is the way it is. 2 are actually Council of Governments, where counties have been eliminated and they have taken on a different role, which is different. Mission is more spelled out in some of the other special acts and statewide authority. So ours question has been raised, and I think it's worth considering. Is ours clear enough? Does it need more clarity? It's clear from funding aspects that we have a role in transportation. We have also been included with the other regional planning agencies for the district local technical assistance funding, and occasionally other opportunities come up as well. One issue that I think we have to be careful about that the other RPAs do not is to avoid intrusion into jurisdictions of our other municipal boards, since we have one town. So I think in other regions, they're merging interests of varied towns together into one. So it's something that I think we clearly want to assist our various boards and commissions, but I don't think we want to overstep into their jurisdictions. Section 2, responsibilities. One of the very broad parts of our existing legislation is creation of plans, and it's referred to as comprehensive plans, retention of experts. There's certainly a question of comprehensive plan and master plan causing confusion and duplication. It has come up before. Chapter 4181D of the Mass General Law puts the master plan responsibility with the planning board, and that is consistent in other communities as well. If you look at the process for creating the master plan from 2009, that was created by the planning board and then approved as to its composition by the planning commission, which is consistent with how other areas do it. Again, in towns with, or in regions with multiple towns, the individual towns prepare their master plans, and then the regional planning agency will prepare an overall plan incorporating what those individual towns do. So the word experts is pretty broad. So that's certainly been interpreted to include staff, consultants, advisors. In other enabling legislation, it's more specific. And then services which are provided to municipality to, again, other regional planning agencies enter into agreements with all or some of their municipalities to provide services. The PLUS agreement is, of course, an example of an agency agreement to provide what are otherwise municipal services for planning board, building department, etc. Section 3 is finance, and right now that's covered by an appropriation that's made by the town. It's different in other RPAs. Some charge basically their communities basically an annual fee based on population. Some have basically a state, guess you'd call it a surcharge that comes out of the what's called the cherry sheet, which is how our NRTA is now funded. But again, finance is something that hasn't been really looked at for some time. Rules and procedures also important. The one change that was made, which is referenced below, was to look at the developments of regional impact, and it came about when we were unfortunately left out of the Ocean Act, as you may remember, where communities that or regional planning agencies that had regulatory authority would have increased ability to locate wind facilities in the coastal waters adjacent to their land, and that at the time only included Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. And then finally, section 5 is just a standard date of effect. So the options that, again, there's certainly variations on these, but to not take action at this time, to study further, incorporate as a goal of master plan, consider other proposed amendments at a future time. I mean, I think you've read that there's discussion about a change in government structure. We could look at amendments now, consider the low-hanging fruit, comprehensive renewal, review, or partial. And I have heard mentioned pursue elimination or consolidation with other RPAs. It's something I wouldn't recommend, but it is something that has come up occasionally, to become part of the Cape Cod Commission or an islands RPA. I don't think that is probably a good idea. The whole concept of how to treat the islands was debated long and hard back in the late 60s, early 70s. And that's really, as the history background kind of gives you a hint on, that's how we ended up where we did. As you can see, the NPNEDC has been amended 4 times. And it's also worth mentioning that we are not referenced in either the town or county charters. So those were our notes to start a dialogue amongst you on what your feelings or direction are to look at this issue, which is, I believe, what town meeting voted in referring the article back for further study. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I have one thing to add, and this is something that's been on my mind for a bit of time. That one thing that has happened that wasn't there before is that the select board now has strategic goals. And in my mind, it's an important question for us to ask ourselves: how can we support the achievement of those strategic goals? How can we incorporate them into the work that we do? I think that that is a very high level document, and deserve some attention from this commission. The other questions that are on my mind for the commission, really the bottom line question is, how do we best serve the community? And who is the community? What are the important components that we need to be working on? Obviously housing and many others could spring to mind, but perhaps we could do a better job of defining what those are. So those are some of my thoughts on this topic. I'm happy to entertain comments from other commissioners. And again, we did want to give you time to think about this. It's an awful lot to answer on the spur of a moment, so this topic will come back. Nat, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I might as well go first, I guess. Maybe I'll go last too, I hope. Andrew, thank you so much for this little sort of cliff note version you brought in. And that reading, as Mary said, reading that stuff that was sent out as far as the mostly the vineyard, true, but how we're related and what was said. I know my father and Kenny Holgate Sr. went up to see Ted about the Forever Wild bill and the issue of zoning in '72 when we didn't pass it. Andrew had to tell the old Nantucketer what really happened because I didn't know. And he informed me of all this a few years back, and quite interesting. It's all sort of laid out in there a little bit. But first thing I want to say real quick is, and this has come up many times over the years, is the term economic development. It's funny because that's about the last thing we want around here, if you listen to any local, because we already have it by itself. And there's always this weird question, well, what are we doing? Why do we want that? And should that even be part of us? Well, I think it's more about acknowledging our economy more than it is promoting economic development. And Andrew has done a lot of things with the cultural district and some other things, our downtown history and all that. The Main Street recognition is one of them. I mean, it sort of happens sort of on its own. And I don't think that, I think that those words could be removed if we were to change the name of our commission. If you look in that legislation, you'll see regional commission in there. That's what they called it at the beginning. And I think that is something we should think about. It is a confusing name. It does get confused with the planning board. It's not regulatory, as Andrew said. That's also, in fact, the state forgot who we were back in 2011, as he indicated. Didn't even realize we were here. It's amazing. But the one thing that is really important, and it's something that was said to me by Frank Spriggs, Don Visco, people came before me that said things to me, is that this commission gives Nantucket a seat at the state's table. It may not seem that way to us, but to them, it's important. So it's important for Nantucket to not lose our standing with the state. It's really, really important. And that gets easily forgotten when we're over here in our little world with our problems or what we think problems are and our solutions, et cetera. But the state looks at us a little differently. And it's very important that that standing remains strong for Nantucket. And the differences between the islands, all you got to do is look at the steamship. There's nothing else to say. They're complete polar opposites. There's nothing that's related except the water. They have completely different issues there than we do. So we definitely need to stay separate. One thing I'd like to bring up, this is something that I haven't said publicly yet, but I've said it to a handful of people. I think that if any changes are made, I mean, I don't think we need any drastic changes, but I think that something we should be considering is including the land bank on our board, on our commission. I think that that is something that the town needs. I think it's time to bring another state agency into our commission when it comes to housing, when it comes to land use, when it comes to all the different sort of crossover issues now. I think the land bank should be on this commission. So I wanted to say that tonight because I think it's a really important thing to think about if we go to the state. As Andrew said, you don't just send home rule petitions for fun to Boston. That's one of the big problems with this is you don't want to do things just to do it. You want to be right and have it clean and simple without any confusion for legislators. So that's it for me for now, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nat. Wendy, and then Seth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Where am I? There you go. I just wanted to mention a little bit about, well, so much is good here. I love the idea of supporting strategic goals across the town, the select board's ones. I think the point about economic development is really important, and it's about shaping the right kind of economic development. Supporting independent businesses, certainly I would argue is a priority. I got involved with this working with Andrew on the chain store bylaw thing way back in the day. If this isn't the right place for it, I know, Christy was doing an excellent job as head of the chamber. If the chamber's doing this role really strongly, then maybe that, becomes less important in this particular group. But it's a really excellent question. How can we either do a better job of this or relocate it somewhere that really is actively supporting the Shellfish Association, the agricultural interests on the island? There's so many things, access to capital for entrepreneurs, like all this stuff is super duper important, and we want to make sure it's happening somewhere. So before we go dropping economic development from our name, let's make sure it's really that torch is flying high, somewhere else. Because it's just crucial, and it's not a bad thing. It's a really, really, really good thing for a lot of people, creating their livelihood here, and diversifying our economy should be a high priority for all of us. So just wanted to mention those couple things. I had something else I forgot. If I remember it, I'll raise my.
Well, I want to follow up before we go to Seth on Wendy's comments. Barry connected me with Peter Burke at the chamber, and I've spoken with him, and he is invited to come speak to us at a future meeting, and is also interested in having a dialogue between our commission and the Chamber of Commerce. So Wendy, that's definitely something that we're looking at. How can we support each other in the economic development goal? And I agree with all of your comments about the diversity of opportunity in economic development. Did that give you a chance to remember anything?
Well, just what a big fan I am of Pete Burke, as a matter of fact, too, a longtime Cisco guy. So working closely with him would be great. And I actually really love that, the reading the letters that Hillary had sent, about like shaping the island and the reason this all got going. The land bank has solved a lot of that character. So I love that idea too, of making sure that we're working closely with them. So thanks to Nat for that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, go ahead, Seth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few points. First, on the topic of economic development, I think a lot of concern from members of the public is that people associate development with meaning growth. But development also just generally means having progress or positive change come forward. It's not necessarily growth oriented. I do think, though, that our commission on a broad level is tasked with all types of development: economic development, social development, logistic development, environmental development. We're looking at a high level plan for all of these services that improve essentially livability on the island. So to prioritize economic development necessarily. I'm not sure if we need to call that out anymore, but our commission does have a role in development generally, for sure. Secondly, I agree with what the director and others have said. I don't have any problem putting together, legislative updates if they're needed. I think if they are needed, doing it through this direct channel that we have access to sounds like a lot easier way than through a home rule petition. But we have to really consider what the point of the update is first. And if there is a point, and if the membership needs to change or the scope needs to change, that's fine. But we I think, I know this is an initial process, but we really have to have several meetings and a well thought out analysis before we just recommend new members or new scope. I mean, we have to consider what the problem is first. And then lastly, I'll just say I thought the history included was very interesting. I'm glad I was able to read it. I believe that I am the youngest member on the commission, and most of the stuff happened before I was even born. So it is good to see the history for me, especially not being involved in this for a long time. So thank you for that.
And I'll add, Seth, I was very happy to realize that I was not the youngest person on the commission, because I think it's really important that we do have younger members of the community contributing to this discussion. And there are quite a few younger than me. So, other comments? Nat, it looks like your hand is still up from the previous comment, or did you have something to add? And then we'll go to Joe. I'm sorry, Joe, I mistook the sail behind you for your hand going up. Right, Barry?
Madam Chair, were you taking public comments on this?
Yes, we are, but Commissioner.
I think I'm going to reserve myself here for a few minutes at this point. I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to chime in, but I'd like to step back for a few minutes if you don't mind, but
okay.
Have comment by the time we close.
Right. If there are no other comments from commissioners, we will go to the public, and Hillary Rayport has her hand raised.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Hillary.
Thank you. Thanks. It's really very positive to hear this discussion. And as I think most of you know, I'm the individual who brought the citizens warrant that was referred for study. And I'm very, very happy to have it studied, very happy to read the history. I sent a letter around. It was just this morning, so I just wanted to read it into the record. It's just a very short letter. One thing that jumped out at me from the planning timeline on Martha's Vineyard included in the meeting packet is how hard the Martha's Vineyard Planning Commission has had to work to keep the 6 vineyard towns from killing the goose that laid the golden egg. The Nantucket Planning Commission looks after all the islands of Nantucket County, but has the advantage of only needing to align divided factions of a single town. It has been easier said than done, but it was done. How did they do it?
Madam Chair.
A remarkable letter.
Point of order.
Barry, yes.
Yeah, we have the letter at this point. I believe that was dispensed to everyone. So I just ask that, of course, will, as with anything, and then just waive the reading of it, please.
No, I'd like to go ahead with the reading of the letter. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm reading the letter for the public also. So how did they do it? I've attached a remarkable letter from the NP and EDC to the island community, written in 1982 as the commission embarked on its first goals and objectives for balanced growth on Nantucket. The Inquirer and Mirror article from 1990 that also attached reports on the commission's activities 8 years later, reflecting on what was achieved and what still lay ahead. In the 1980s and early 1990s, the NP and EDC met every 2 weeks. It achieved numerous successes in favor of balanced growth that still benefit Nantucket today. Because we have our own regional planning agency, Nantucket's planning director may look across the whole island region, build consensus, and tap into state and federal funds needed to achieve goals. I introduced Article 81 at the 2022 annual town meeting with the primary goal of giving citizens more direct engagement in long-range planning. Article 81 had strong support on the floor of the 2022 annual town meeting, but was referred for further study in a 188 to 172 vote. And I look forward to sharing my thoughts on a new version of Article 81 and engaging with you in your study if you will allow it. And then I hope you all really enjoyed reading the letter from the NP&EDC of 1982 written to the entire island community. So that's available if people want to read it or request it. And just how much was done. The major commercial development bylaw, the land bank, the wellhead protection area, just to name a few. So now I know that you're going to be studying this and coming up with terrific ideas, many of which were mentioned on the list that Andrew presented. I do want to see the opportunity for more people to engage with long-range planning. And most importantly, I want to see long-range planning come to fruition. I want to see the fruits of long-range planning. So I am going to be bringing another citizens article just because I have to do it by the 14th. Otherwise, I don't have the opportunity. So I hope you won't receive it as, premature. It's really just a placeholder because it has to be done. And I did have one idea, well, a couple ideas, elected at-large members. I think it's very important to give people the opportunity to run directly for this planning commission. The Vineyard has 9 elected at-large members. So I think it's consistent with Nantucket to have elected members. And I thought one change might be to phase it in. So in other words, as at-large members come to the end of their term, they would be replaced by an elected member. I also felt like I'm curious to know how this commission would feel about adding back the DPW or other representative from the town. I just looked at what happened when the DPW was removed. The DPW stopped coming as much to the meetings because he or she wasn't on the meeting. Wasn't on the commission. So I actually did map attendance and there was much less attendance after this person left. And then what happened was when the transportation planner left, there wasn't like that continuity to pick up some of these projects. And they just seem, the infrastructure is so important and a lot of these projects are town-led. So of course, if it is the designee of the town manager, he or she or he in the future doesn't need to appoint somebody, but the fact that there could be that cooperation seemed to work well in the past. And then the other idea I had that I wanted to actually speak with the other commission about was adding the land bank. And I see you've also brought that up. As I realized how important an achievement the land bank was just in looking at the literature from the past, I saw the potential for the land bank as a planning tool working in concert. So those are my thoughts, my contributions. I'm thrilled to have this discussion start. And I will just say in closing that even though you do have the opportunity to bring legislation, a request directly to the general court, it always means so much more if it comes with a mandate from town meeting. And I think you are nonetheless reliant on our state representatives shepherding it through the general administration. So I would encourage a town meeting engagement for this. And I look forward to continuing the dialogue and hearing your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Just a comment, it's more complicated than just whether or not the DPW representative attends. I believe that there are conflicts with any town employee serving on any town commission. But Andrew certainly can provide more detail or correct me if I'm wrong in saying that. So we'll go to Andrew, Leslie, Nat, and Barry.
Thank you, Mary. I did want to, point out that that change was brought about because of exactly what you said. There is a conflict with, fellow employees sitting on a policy level board. That request was made directly from the town manager for that change to occur. And the town manager continues to not be in favor of replacing that position. The town manager can, and I think has, assigned the DPW director to be a regular attendee at the planning commission meeting. And again, because there was vacancies and different people at different times, of course, that particular system broke down during the COVID period. Remember, Mike left right at the beginning of that in March. We had DPW director Rob, who was actually a frequent member at the planning commission and was a willing participant to come. And then he left. The new DPW director, again, has his literal hands full with all kinds of projects. He and Patrick, are working to build their relationship, and it's quite a process to get caught up again. But I think it's important for you all to understand that that position was removed. It's very unusual to have an employee sitting on a policy level board and casting votes that basically the town manager has said they were uncomfortable with that position doing. And that goes back to when quite a while. That's when Cara was still on the commission. So anyway, and it took a while for that to finally pass. So I just think that is a definite step backward and should not be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Leslie, did you want to add anything, or did Andrew cover that?
Andrew covered all of my points.
Oh, sorry.
We'll go to Nat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so appreciate Hillary's comments. I think that the fact that we're discussing this and the fact that all the points that have been made tonight, which actually are pretty solid, should be continued. It should be taken as a positive outcome, whether it's from Hillary's article last year or just general change, as you've seen, it's happened since 1973. The Concom is appointed. The FinCom is appointed. The ZBA is appointed. The Historical Commission is appointed. There are 7 elected members on this commission. 5 planning board members. The county commissioner appointee is an elected official, and the housing authority is an elected official. I'm gonna say, I just don't understand how the 3 at-large positions that are picked 1 per year makes any sense to try to make that a sign on the side of the road. Is absolutely ridiculous and does not bring any more diversity or more inclusion or whatever you want to call it, as far as more people being involved, than it does with the process that we have now, because it would make it less attractive. I think that was a pretty clear comment that was made a year ago about this. The DPW issue, that was, Andrew laid that out pretty clearly, but you got to remember too, that the DPW is an ex officio on the right-of-way committee, traffic safety member, and our committee. I mean, they're on all kinds of different things, and they have a say in all these different boards and commissions that they're on now. So I don't see, I was around a long time. I've seen when Jeff wouldn't show up at a meeting and Mohammed would be the designee. And, you know, it's going to be, there's always a seat at the table for the DPW. Okay. So that's not even a question. But I think you've heard tonight that there's room for improvement. There's room for improvement with the selectmen. I like the idea of a 5-year term that Don brought up at the last meeting. There used to be 3 members of selectmen members. So, I mean, you know, we gotta come back to earth. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Nantucket is more protected than the vineyard. The vineyard's got 30% developed land, 30% taxed, undeveloped, and 40% open space. Nantucket has 65% untaxed, 32% developed, and 3% privately owned open space. So I think the race to open space in Nantucket is won. So the vineyard's got a lot of buildable land. So be careful what you say about the vineyard being ahead of us or any kind of way. I feel that we need to continue this conversation and discuss change. Certainly not going to be ready for this year, I don't think, but I think it's a healthy conversation to have, and I look forward to it. And the land bank idea was mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. I want to just make sure that other members of the public are aware that they do have the opportunity to comment at this time. If you can use the raise hand feature, or if that's not available to you, let us know otherwise. Christy, comments?
Thank you. I just wanted to give a couple of thoughts. I first wanted to thank Hillary for the letter that she sent this morning with the history. I thought reading the letter from the 1970s sounded like it could have been written today, with the discussion around housing costs and all the other challenges that are still facing us, which just illustrates the amount of work we still have to do in protecting and serving the island. Their comments around elected officials, I have the same concerns as Nat around changing the at-large positions to elected. I think having it be an appointed position is something that allows people to get into the town boards and committees and regulations, and switching that to elected. Elections cost money that kind of goes against bringing in inclusion, diversity, and equity into this board, and might prevent people from actually being involved in the NPDC. So I think there's a few more cons than pros to changing those 3 positions. And around the land bank seat, I think we've all said it. I think it's something worth considering and exploring for the future, and I'd be in favor of that. So just wanted to give a few thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Christy. If there are no other commission comments, we'll go back to Hillary.
Hi, thank you very much. Nat, I am so happy to have this land bank be your idea. I just want to say that. Hopefully they'll agree. And I appreciate the feedback about the DPW, and that makes sense. So I understand this will be a continuing conversation. I think the argument in favor of the elected folks, I definitely take Christy's point. Elections can be expensive. And the benefit is just the independence, because, you know, when you're appointed, you're really serving at the pleasure of the folks that appoint you. And we've all experienced, some more than others, what happens. I also think that when a person says, I want to run for something, they're running for that thing. That's what they care most about. And when a board has a right of appointment, they also serve for that. So if you're on the planning board, it's a twofer, right? You run for the planning board. Maybe long range planning isn't really what gets you out of bed in the morning. Maybe you really love zoning. But you also serve on this commission, and that's fine. But I think there is a difference when you let people actually run. So those would be my arguments for the elected commission, just to put some different ideas out there for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. I'll note there are a lot of nuances and differences between an elected and an appointed position. And to my view, the elected is sometimes less independent because they are soliciting campaign contributions or are solicited by people who want to have a representative of their views, where the at-large, anybody from the community can indicate an interest and doesn't have to go through a campaign, doesn't have to raise funds, doesn't have to devote the time and energy that takes. And that is a considerable amount of time and energy. So from my perspective, I do prefer the at-large appointment. I think it makes it available to more members of the community. But there are certainly many different perspectives on that question. Barry?
Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I almost feel like we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. These are some great conversations, but to start beginning to define those tonight, I think is maybe a little premature. It's fine. It's good to have it out there, but I think we need to be prudent about how we spend our time with certain things. I think I've got some mixed feelings about things. I just will tell you, look, I don't want to go back and forth here, but I looked at the letter that came in and I'm a little disappointed with some of the narrative that's in there, but that's a conversation to be had at another time, at another place. Okay. That said, I think it's good every so often if you can take a mirror and hold it up to yourself and kind of reflect about who you are, what you're doing, and where you're at. Things change over time. And I think we are now at a stage of where we need, it's high time to look at ourselves, whatever the case may be. It's just good to do that every so often, because since the last time we've done it, there's been some changes, not just here on the island as well too, but in the state and in the federal government as well. And stepping back a little bit gives you that ability to look at all that stuff and say, how does it apply or integrate, or what do we need to pick up above and beyond that? Just one thing I really want to caution people here. It's too easy to start looking at us in a much bigger scope. But I don't think any of us want to be the board of everything, okay? And that's something we're going to need to maybe curb some of the conversation on, recognizing the fact that there are other boards and commissions already taking some of this stuff on well above and beyond us. I honestly think we need to look at not only just ourselves on Nantucket, but we need to look at how we begin to interface with the other RPAs and regions as well too. I was a rep on the RPA at the regional planning agencies of Massachusetts, and that was very insightful at times. But I always had to kind of dial back in as well too. It's good to know, and it's good to try to work with these people, and maybe if we can support certain initiatives that need to take place in the state. But we also need to look at us as well too and realize our uniqueness out here as well. We are going to cross that bridge at some point. And like I said too, the economic development thing, this is why I thought it was really important to have Peter come to us at a meeting, and I will want to do more of those for this commission. The more we learn about other agencies and how they can interact with us, not only what are they doing, but what can they also bring to the table as well too. Where are those partnerships there? I mean, I think that's really some of the things that we need to do that. I did that with the planning board a while ago, and that worked really well. There were some very insightful moments as we had other department heads and other people come in and just chat with us and begin to say, okay, there's this, there's that. This is how we view things. This is maybe something you should be aware of. How can we work together to do it as well too? This is something that's going to take some time. And I don't envision this being a 1 or 2 meeting process. I think what we should probably do is make this a routine of maybe a half an hour, 40 minutes at each one of our meetings. I'm tempted to say a half an hour, and just pick off a topic and begin to talk about it and discuss it. And then with the realization of that, the further we get into this, there's probably going to be an opportunity where we're going to have to come back in and revisit and refine certain things even further. So it's going to be a work in progress. I don't see this happening in a month or 2 or 3, unless you want to think about doing a dedicated workshop. That will take a heck of a lot of time. When I look at this list, I see a lot of different things and a lot of different pieces of information that need to come forward. And of course, there's also going to be various viewpoints that are going to come in from the commissioners about as well, about what we should and shouldn't be looking at, and then come to a consensus about it. But I do want to put that out there, that I would love to see this thing on our agenda for quite the next several months, dedicating half an hour into it and just picking off a topic. I mean, I think at a minimum, we at least kind of maybe need to look at options that were listed out by Andrew. That might be a good jumping off point, just to have that discussion and say, okay, here we are. There's a majority of us, maybe it's unanimous about where we're heading to with that. Maybe a simple thing, maybe looking at the name change. Okay, not that we won't go back to it. I guarantee we're going to have that discussion again. But I think there's a very systematic way to work through it. I would encourage us to take our time with this as well too, not look at any deadlines or objectives here, and be faithful to what we're really trying to do with our future. Because I don't know, when I hear there's no long range planning, I think there's been a fair amount of long range planning. It's just sometimes being an advisory board, not everyone's going to glom onto that. And that is probably one of the most difficult things that I've sat through with this board is, trying to do long range plans like, oh, thank you very much for your advice. That goes up on the shelf. Have a nice day. But I would dare say this commission has done it. And I think we're about to do it again right now. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Barry. We do have Tobias Glidden with his hand up. Can we go to him, please? And Nat, your hand is still up. I don't know if that is a further comment or an artifact.
It's a further one.
Okay, after
Thank you,
Tobias,
though.
we'll go to you, Nat.
Thank you. Quick.
I'll be quick. Thank you, Chairwoman Longacre. Just a couple general comments. I think a lot of what Barry said about long-range planning, it is really challenging, but a lot of the structure enables really good planning. So I want to bring folks back to 2012. Linda Williams brought forward a warrant article to change the structure of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And at that time, it was 5 members of the select board and then 1 appointed person. And that structure didn't lend itself well to grappling the issue of affordable housing. And since that structure has changed, the community has moved forward in a very positive fashion in tackling affordable housing through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's been a really good mechanism to start to get our hands around the issue of affordable housing. And so I would encourage the board members to think about, whatever the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Committee wants to focus on long term, the structure, planning, those two are integrated. Nat, I like your comments about incorporating a land bank member, but then the question is the board's role to really mimic a land bank role? I think it's a question we should ask. And lastly, on the economic development piece, I think historically Nantucket was a very successful place through whaling and fisheries policy and sheep fur wool exports, mainly because we kept money on the island. That's reflected through keeping off, chain businesses through a lot of the work Wendy Hudson did. And so I think, as an island, and Nat, this best, we spend a tremendous amount of money as a community on like fuel, maybe in the, I don't know, $80 to $100 million per year. On electricity, we spend about $35 million per year. So there's things we can do that are not necessarily economic development, but economic retention. And I think that enables a stronger community to move forward in time. I think a lot of the efforts the land bank has done to encourage more food be grown on the island, that is keeping economic vitality on the island. It's keeping wealth on the island. I think that's just a really point I want to express, and that the structure of your board does manifest in the type of solutions you'll have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tobias. I think Nat had one more comment, and then I think we need to move on. Yeah.
Well, maybe we can do something about the deer population planning. So I would respectfully just want to say a quick thing about Nantucket, since it was on our agenda. Speaking to long-range planning, 2006, the area plan was adopted. A lot of odd zoning stuff was considered. They had the RC over at the over at the boatyard. There was a whole bunch of stuff out there that really needed to get cleaned up. And then here comes the tennis club and water. And Andrew and staff came up with the VR zoning, which was hatched in Nantucket. Height restrictions, changed all that R20 to Lug 1 on Longwood, Long Pond Drive, and even got a hold of the DeLacy property and got that a little less buildable. So 13 years later, all hell breaks loose with this sewer analysis, making it look like planning never planned in Nantucket. But we already fixed Nantucket. Now that's a hard conversation to have, but that planning that happened 13 years ago, it started really in 06, but fixed something. It solved an issue. If those zoning changes weren't made, there may have been pushback to actually change it today. So it's hard to quantify planning because sometimes planning happens without a plan. It sort of just kind of happens. There's all these letters in the 60s against Cisco Estates. There wasn't even a house out there. People were mad because they couldn't see the water. There was no houses. So, we've been complaining for a long time on Nantucket. I can tell you that. So what I want to say is I'd respectfully request Hillary to reconsider submitting this article for this year's town meeting as a result of this meeting tonight and meetings going forward. So not to confuse the public again at town meeting and cause a lot of process that has to happen through FinCom, and the whole process to get to the warrant is painful. And I see no benefit to bringing another article, whether it's a placeholder or not. And I understand what that means, but a placeholder article still has to go through the process. Doesn't just get put on for fun. I think you see a commitment to looking at the board, the current makeup of the commission, vision, etc. You're going to see a build-out analysis soon. There's a lot of things that are happening, and I think that for full, a sense of calmness this year, which would be nice. Maybe we can avoid that process this time around. Thank you.
Thank you, Nat. Okay, next item on the agenda is the discussion of the 2023 annual town meeting. And Andrew, do you want to start that discussion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Moderator. I just wanted to, about this time of year is where we have discussions about potential warrant articles with all of our different boards. If there are ideas that anybody has to advance warrant articles that might be supported by the commission, now's the time to talk about them. We have already a list going with the planning board on articles that related to zoning and other things that they are working on supporting, but I didn't know if there were any particular ideas that the commission might have or not. We're not under the same limitation that a citizen article is. After the 15th, basically the the select board control the warrant, and so any article would have to be approved by them for inclusion. But if there are any ideas that anybody would like to move forward or for further discussion, please let us know.
Thank you, Andrew. Any comments from commissioners? Not seeing any at this time. Next item on the agenda is other committee updates and reports. I will start off. At our last meeting, Wendy Hudson asked a question about a climate action plan. And I noticed that the town posted a new position for sustainability coordinator. And one of the first things on that job description is the charge to develop a climate plan. So Wendy, the town heard you. That may be taken out of our hands as it's assigned to that new role. But certainly something we can follow. So other committee updates? Andrew?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted just to let you all know that I am, I don't know if all of you are aware, but our Regional Transit Authority Administrator, Paula Leary, is retiring at the end of this year. And there is a search for her replacement, and I've been asked to be on that hiring committee. So just wanted to let you know about that. I know she tried to join us earlier tonight. I think she had some problems getting in, but as you know, she's served a long time in the town and has really worked diligently to build the transit system. So sure well. So just to let you all know that.
Andrew, was she the administrator from day one for the NRTA? The first and only?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, certainly we can thank her for everything that we have today. That's a tremendous job for the town.
Great.
Wendy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to report that I did attend the September 23rd meeting of the Rural Policy Advisory Commission on behalf of the NPEDC. It was held in Essex, Mass, at the Shipbuilding Museum, which was fascinating. It was in conjunction with the Smithsonian's Crossroads exhibit on rural America, which is a really well done exhibit highlighting the strengths and things that rural communities have to offer. It's a traveling exhibit in Massachusetts. I don't have the website at the top of my head, but I invite the public to Google that and try to catch it. It's going to about 6 different towns, I believe, in Massachusetts in the course of the year. So so that was cool. And the other thing of note was that the rural policy report that we had completed was pre-COVID and pre the change of administration. So we're discussing how to update that, you know, kind of related to all these different master plans and the acceleration of our world and the importance of updating it more frequently. So that will be happening again, and, you know, always looking for ways to include the public and include, you know, voices more from our town too, going forward. So I'll share that one.
Thank you, Wendy. Other reports? If there are none, our next meeting is Monday, November 21st. That is the week of Thanksgiving. Hopefully that is not a full vacation week for everybody, but if you're not available, please let the planning department know so we can make sure that we have a quorum. If there's nothing else, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you for seconding. I think that was Barry chiming in.
Christie.
Oh, Christy. Roll call vote. Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Wendy Hudson. Wendy, you're muted. Or maybe frozen.
Duck.
Well,
Yeah. Dave Iverson,
Aye.
thank you. Wendy, are you back? Thumbs up.
I am back. Sorry, it froze.
8 o'clock.
Did we lose Bert already?
Did you get me? Aye.
got
I
you,
think
Dave.
that one's Bert. Yeah, we did get Dave. Thank you. Nat,
Aye.
Barry,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you all. We'll see you in November. And please do think about options for the NP and EDC enabling legislation.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Great job.
Good night.
See you guys. Where are we going? There we go.